They chuckled when I was asked to move, the old mother displaced for appearances. They didn't know whose name was carved into the hardwood frame, hidden just beneath the plush velvet. They certainly didn't know that the person reading the final minutes of this gala was me. My name is Eleanor Whitford, and I am 66 years old. The grand opening of the Riverlight Arts Pavilion was an event Lakehurst, Ohio, had been anticipating for years, and I arrived precisely on time. The new lobby was a cathedral of modern ambition, crystal chandeliers, looking more like captured explosions of light than mere fixtures, blazed above the throng. The air was thick with the competing scents of expensive perfume and the faint, sharp smell of new paint. A heavy, dark red velvet curtain concealed the main stage, and the murmur of the crowd was a high-frequency vibration of money and expectation. My invitation was printed on heavy, cream-coloured cardstock. It was unambiguous Box A, Seat 1. Reserved. I saw them immediately, holding court near the velvet rope that sectioned off the exclusive donor boxes. My son, Nathan, and his wife. Bryn? They waved, their smiles bright and theatrical. Bryn's sequined dress fractured the light as she moved. I walked toward them, adjusting the cuff of my own simple, dark silk dress. I expected an embrace, perhaps a shared glance of pride in what the community had built. Instead, Bryn intercepted me, her hand landing on my forearm. It was a gesture meant to look affectionate for the surrounding crowd, but to me, it felt like pure stage management, a handler steadying a difficult asset. "Mum, there you are," Bryn said, her voice a polished, airy coo. "Listen, we had to make a tiny, last-minute seating adjustment." She gestured elegantly into the box. Her parents, Leonard and Maureen Caldwell, were already making themselves comfortable in the plush, front-row seats. Leonard, a man who seemed to fill every space he entered, was easing his substantial frame into Seat 1. My seat. Maureen Caldwell, already holding a flute of champagne, looked up at me over the rim of her glass, her expression one of mild, practiced inconvenience. "Oh, Eleanor, it's just dreadful, isn't it? But the press is here, and you understand how these things are." Nathan shuffled, his gaze fixed firmly on the toe of his gleaming Italian leather shoes. "Mom," he began, the word coming out strained. "The Caldwells are, well, they're front and centre for the business tonight. We really need them in the primary shot for the papers." Bryn leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still perfectly audible to anyone nearby. "Mum, would you mind just standing by the railing for the first half? The VIPs for the in-laws really need the visibility. It's crucial for the brand." The VIPs, not me. I, apparently, was just the mother. A young usher, clutching his seating chart with white knuckles, looked utterly baffled. "But Mrs. Whitford," he stammered, looking at me. "Your placard. The seat is reserved for—" Bryn cut him off with a dazzling, dismissive smile that did not reach her eyes. "We've handled it. Thank you." She reached past Leonard, plucked the small, engraved brass placard reading E.W. from its holder on the armrest, and with a flick of her wrist, flipped it face down onto the small ledge, just like that. I was erased. I stepped back as instructed, nodding pleasantly. I played the part they had assigned me, the dutiful, flexible, accommodating mother-in-law. I saw the flashbulbs pop from the floor below, where the Lakehurst Gazette photographers were positioned. The cameras panned the donor boxes, capturing the prestigious front row. I knew exactly what that photograph would show Leonard and Maureen Caldwell, beaming patrons of the arts, flanked by their glowing daughter and their successful, handsome son-in-law. And in the background, standing politely by the brass railing, slightly out of focus, would be me, the voluntary wallflower, the ghost at their feast. Nathan refused to meet my eyes. He busied himself checking his phone, though I knew there was no signal in the pavilion's main hall. He adjusted his bow tie, his jaw tight. He knew what this was. He knew the disrespect. But he remained silent. Bryn, however, was in her element. She turned back to her father, laughing at something he said, smoothing the silk of her gown over her hip, offering a perfect three-quarter profile for the society pages. She was a natural, born for this kind of spotlight. I rested my hand on the back of the empty chair next to me, gripping the railing. My gaze, however, was fixed on seat 1, on Leonard's meaty hand resting on the velvet armrest. My hand drifted, seemingly casual, toward the box railing. But my fingers grazed the armrest of seat 1, just where Leonard's suit jacket failed to cover the polished wooden frame. I didn't need to see it. I had felt it 1,000 times before the new upholstery was even installed. Just below the plush velvet, my fingertips traced the sharp, familiar divots carved decades ago. A name. My maiden name. A detail no one here had ever bothered to learn. I watched Leonard accept another glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Go ahead, I thought. The orchestra tuning up below, the low thrum of the cellos vibrating through the floor. Get comfortable. Sit. But that chair knows who it belongs to, and tonight, it will call out for its rightful owner. Standing by the railing, invisible to the stage. The present noise of the gala faded, replaced by the crushing silence of the hospital 25 years ago. I was 41 when my husband died, 41 when the world shrank to a single point of focus. Nathan. I raised him alone, navigating the minefield of adolescence, college applications, and law school tuition on a salary that, on paper, looked modest. To Nathan, and to everyone else in Lakehurst. I was just Eleanor, the quiet widow, the woman who drove a 15-year-old sedan, wore practical wool coats, and volunteered at the library. This was a deliberate choice, a performance. My real life was spent in a grey, nondescript building downtown at the Tri-County Integrity Office. My title was Senior Forensic Auditor. For 30 years. I hunted for things people thought they had hidden. I followed fractions of pennies, traced ghost employees, and unraveled complex financial knots designed to defraud the public. I was, by trade, a woman who specialized in finding the truth buried under layers of polite fiction. There was one case, a massive public contract fraud, that had defined my career. The files were still sealed by court order, not to be opened for another 15 years. That case taught me patience. It taught me that if you wait long enough, the truth will always find its moment. I learned to sit quietly, to observe, to gather facts, and to never ever show my hand until the board was set to my advantage. Nathan, bless him, inherited my intellect, but not my patience. He wanted the world, and he wanted it immediately. He passed the bar, full of fire and ambition, and quickly established his own law firm, Whitford Hale LLP. He was driven, and I was so proud of him. Then came Bryn. She entered our lives like a weather event, all flashing smiles, sharp designer clothes, and overwhelming confidence. She was as ambitious as Nathan, But her ambition was louder, shinier. He was instantly captivated. They married in a lavish ceremony that I barely recognized, an event entirely orchestrated by her parents, the Caldwells, and just like that, the axis of our family tilted. From the day of the wedding, the center of gravity shifted decisively from my small, comfortable home to the Caldwells' sprawling, ostentatious estate. Everything began to revolve around them, their schedule, their preferences, their social calendar. The slights began as small omissions. A Sunday dinner I only heard about from a neighbor. A text from Nathan. "Sorry, Mum, we're with the Caldwells this weekend. Next week, for sure." Next week never came. Then the omissions became more direct, more personal. I would be invited. But my presence was treated as an afterthought, an awkward variable to be managed. At a family barbecue at their club, there was, mysteriously, one less chair at the main table. "Oh, Eleanor, how dreadful," Maureen had said, not looking up from her lobster salad. "They must have miscounted. There's a perfectly lovely spot at the kids' table." At Thanksgiving, after driving an hour, I found the driveway full. No room. "Mom," Bryn called from the porch, waving. "Just park down the street." Down the street was a half-mile walk in the freezing rain. Each time, I would look to Nathan. Each time, he would flinch and look away, offering the same weary phrase later, in private. "Mum, please don't be sensitive. They're a lot. You know how they are. Just try to keep the peace." Keeping the peace meant swallowing my dignity. It meant accepting the role of the inconvenient, easily dismissed old woman. Bryn, for her part, would send a text message the following day. Never a call. Just a string of bright, meaningless emojis, a smiley face, a heart, a cartoon flower, a digital pat on the head, an apology that cost her nothing and erased nothing. So I chose silence. But my silence was not surrender. It was strategy. The habits of a forensic auditor die hard. I didn't get angry. I got methodical. I observed. I documented. I recorded every casual dismissal, every time I was made to feel small, every instance where my son chose their comfort over my respect. I remembered every detail, every broken promise, every emoji. I was building a different kind of file, a ledger of small cruelties, waiting for the one entry that would finally demand an audit. The audit trigger arrived 6 months ago, not as a thunderclap, but as a whisper. I was at Nathan and Bryn's house, performing the grandmotherly duty of watering their plants while they were in Aspen for a long weekend. Nathan's briefcase was left uncharacteristically open on the dining room table, overflowing with files from his firm. A document, separate from the others, had slid out. It was a draft, a durable, comprehensive power of attorney. My blood did not run cold. It sharpened. I picked it up. My name was on the first page as the grantor. Nathan was listed as the primary agent. Standard enough, perhaps, for a man concerned about his aging mother. Then I turned the page. The secondary, contingent beneficiary. The person who would take control should Nathan be unable or unwilling to serve, was not a member of our family. It was Maureen Caldwell. I placed the document back on the table, exactly as I had found it. The air in the room felt thin. This wasn't concern. This was planning. I moved to the study, where Bryn's laptop was asleep on her desk. I nudged the mouse, not to snoop, but simply to move it aside to dust. The screen awoke, displaying her inbox. She hadn't locked it. An email, open on the screen, caught my eye. It was from their financial advisor. The subject line was Asset Consolidation Strategy. I read the most recent message in the chain, a reply from Bryn. Let's hold on the brokerage transfer. But once the POA is signed, we can move her River Cottage into the liquid assets portfolio. It's too valuable to just sit there. Her River Cottage. My cottage. The one my husband and I had built with our own hands. A property they intended to liquidate. I stood there for a full minute, the rhythmic ticking of the antique clock on the mantel filling the silence. I felt no surge of betrayal, no hot flush of anger. Instead, a profound and icy clarity settled over me, the kind I used to feel just before breaking a big case. The moment the pattern emerges from the noise, they were not just dismissing me. They were liquidating me. I did not confront them. I did not send an angry text or leave a tearful voicemail. An auditor never alerts the subject of an investigation. Instead, I took out my old, reliable phone. I opened the camera, my hands perfectly steady. I photographed the POA draft, capturing the header, the date, the signature lines, and the chilling contingent beneficiary clause. I photographed Bryn's email, ensuring the timestamp and the sender's details were clear. Then I closed the laptop, finished watering the plants, and left. The next morning, I did not call Nathan. I called Marisol Crane, an attorney whose reputation for ironclad estate law was legendary in Ohio. She was sharp, discreet, and most importantly, had absolutely no connection to my son's firm or the Caldwells. We met in her office, a quiet space filled with books and dark wood. I laid out the situation with the same dispassion I would use to present a case file. Marisol listened without interruption, her fingers steepled. "They're moving too fast. Eleanor," she said when I finished. "This POA is aggressively broad, and listing the other mother-in-law as contingent is irregular. They'll likely frame this as a concern for your health, your cognition." "My mind is clear," I said. "We need to prove it," she replied. "Objectively. Before they can manufacture a crisis, my next appointment was with Dr. Petra Sloan, the head of geriatric neuropsychology at Cleveland's Best Hospital. I endured 3 hours of rigorous cognitive and legal capacity evaluations. I recited number strings backward. I identified complex patterns. I explained the abstract nuances of proverbs and legal concepts. The final report was unequivocal. Cognitive function superior. It read, mental acuity and legal capacity fully intact. I was not just competent. I was, in Dr. Sloane's words, exceptionally sharp. I had the baseline. I had the proof. Back in Marisol's office, we built the fortress. "We can't just revoke the draft POA, they'll simply create another pretext," Marisol advised. "We need to make your assets invisible to their authority." She recommended a revocable living trust, but with specific, customized defenses. We transferred every significant asset I owned: my house, the River Cottage, my retirement accounts, even my small art collection into the trust. I was the grantor, and I was the trustee. But Marisol added a duress clause. Any attempt to move assets by an agent acting under a POA, especially one executed after the trust's date, would trigger an immediate review by a third-party corporate trustee. Furthermore, any attempt to liquidate the River Cottage would require a signatory approval from Marisol's firm directly. "They can get you to sign a POA, Eleanor," Marisol said, sliding the final signature page toward me. "But this document makes it useless." I signed the stack of papers. My signature was firm, the ink dark and clear. My hand did not shake. One final step remained. Bryn's casual mention of liquid assets and the Caldwell's sudden, conspicuous presence at every city function had lit a different kind of warning light. One from my old job. This wasn't just family greed. This felt bigger. I made one last call. To a name I hadn't spoken in years. Deke Hanlon. Deke was a private investigator, a man who lived in the shadows of public records. He was the best tracker of municipal money I had ever known. Eleanor. He'd grunted into the phone, his voice like gravel. I thought you were retired. I am, I said, looking out my window at the quiet street. But I have a professional question. I need to know everything you can find on a company called Caldwell Urban Works. Deke Hanlon was a ghost, and he was worth every penny. He didn't text or call with flashy updates. He just worked. 2 weeks after my call, a plain manila envelope appeared in my locked mailbox. Inside were not theories, but facts. Deke had zeroed in on the one project that mattered most to the Caldwells, the multi-million-dollar public-private restoration of the Riverlight Arts Pavilion. The gala. Caldwell Urban Works was the lead contractor. Deke had a source inside the city procurement office. He'd found a pattern. The project was hemorrhaging money, not in large, obvious chunks, but in a death by 1,000 cuts. The file was filled with dozens of change orders, minor adjustments to the original contract. They were all remarkably similar. An upgrade to the wiring, a different supplier for the brass fixtures, a last-minute change to the acoustic paneling. Each one was priced just under the wire, coming in at $4,900 or $4,850. They were meticulously kept just below the $5,000 threshold that would trigger an automatic, mandatory review by the City Audit Committee. It was amateurish, in its own way. Cocky. Attached to this analysis was a second file, tracing the payments for these change orders. They weren't going to the suppliers. They were being routed to a shell company I had never heard of, L&M Consulting. The registered agents were an anonymous legal service, but the initials were insultingly obvious. Leonard and Maureen. This consulting firm received these fees on a rolling basis, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. The account was active, with money flowing in and right back out. Deke had tracked the outflow. The money from L&M Consulting made one hop to a small, private equity fund before being disbursed. The final destination, a series of payments to a high-limit credit card. The account holder was listed as Bryn Whitford. The transaction codes matched payments for her car lease, a spa membership, and, most tellingly, large invoices from a public relations firm. She was using public money, siphoned by her father, to build her personal brand. Deke's report was thorough. He included photographs of the original contracts, copies of the falsified change order invoices, and the bank transfer ledgers. The final, beautiful piece of evidence was a printout of the electronic signature logs for the change orders. Deke had traced the MAC address, the unique digital fingerprint of the computer that had submitted and approved the final 3 fraudulent invoices. It wasn't a City Hall computer. It was from a laptop registered to Bryn's personal home network. The chain was complete. The connection was undeniable. Caldwell Urban Works submitted a fraudulent charge. L&M Consulting Leonard and Maureen billed for it. The money was washed, and Bryn spent it. This was no longer a family squabble about seating arrangements or hurt feelings. This was conspiracy to commit fraud. I looked at the package for a long time. My son, Nathan, was a partner in a law firm bearing the Hale name. Bryn was his wife. This report, if it ever saw the light of day, would not just liquidate my assets, it would incinerate his entire life. I needed one more layer. Deke was a PI. His evidence was good, but it could be dismissed as shadowy, perhaps even illegally obtained. I needed something sterile, something irrefutable, something that wore a suit and carried a state license. I called Jonah Pike. Jonah was the best certified public accountant in the state, a man who found narrative in numbers. He was my former protégé, and he owed me a favor from a case we'd worked back in '98. Jonah, I said, I need an AUP engagement. He knew the term, an agreed-upon procedures report. It wasn't a full audit, which would require the company's cooperation. It was a surgical strike. I would give him a specific set of data, Deke's files, and he would perform a specific set of tests, then issue a formal, independent report on his findings. Who's the target? He asked. Caldwell Urban Works. Specifically, their billing on the Riverlight Pavilion project. There was a sharp intake of breath. Eleanor, that's Leonard Caldwell. He's on the board of everything. I know, I said. Just the facts, Jonah. Check the change orders against the payment ledgers and trace the beneficiary account. That's all. Jonah worked for 3 days. His report arrived by bonded courier. It was cold, precise, and utterly devastating. He had confirmed 21 separate instances of billing discrepancies. He noted, in the dry language of an accountant, that the payments to L&M Consulting had no corresponding deliverables in the project plan. Then came the final page. Jonah had flagged 3 specific transactions, the ones Deke had tied directly to Bryn's MAC address. He wrote, "These specific items bear indicators inconsistent with clerical error and show strong evidence of willful misrepresentation and fraudulent intent." Fraud. The word was now official, stamped with the seal of a respected CPA. I locked the AUP report and Deke's envelope in the small safe behind my husband's portrait. I did not call my son. I did not text him a warning. This was no longer about Nathan's loyalty or Bryn's rudeness. This was a criminal enterprise that was using my son's good name as a shield. It was not time to warn them. It was time to build the trap. The timing of Deke's report was perfect. The Riverlight Trust's board of directors was, at that very moment, in a quiet state of flux. They were searching for a new honorary chairperson, a figurehead position traditionally offered to the largest and most publicly respected donor. Separately, the finance committee was buzzing about an anonymous benefactor who had, at the 11th hour, emerged to underwrite the entire state-of-the-art acoustic system. It was a massive check, one that accounted for nearly 40% of the final interior budget, and it had saved the project from significant embarrassing cutbacks. That anonymous benefactor was me. The check had been drawn from a private account established by Marisol Crane, bearing only my maiden name, E. Whitcomb. The current chairman of the trust, Arturo Mendel, was an old and dear friend. Arturo was a retired symphony conductor, a precise and passionate man who cared more for artistic integrity than for the clumsy posturing of Lakehurst's new money crowd. He was one of only 2 people alive who knew the identity of E. Whitcomb. He called me 1 week before the gala, his voice warm over the line. "Eleanor," he said, "the board is restless. This anonymous donation for the acoustics is the largest single gift we've received since the groundbreaking. They want to name this E. Whitcomb as the new honorary chair." Are you finally ready to take a bow? Not yet, Arturo, I said, looking at Jonah Pike's devastating report sitting on my desk. But I have a condition, not for my reveal, but for the integrity of the trust itself. A condition? He sounded amused. You've already given us the world, Eleanor? This is a legal matter, I said, and I could feel my professional voice, the old auditor's voice, take over. I want to propose an emergency amendment to the Trust's bylaws, an integrity clause. It must be voted on before the gala. I heard the scrape of his chair as he sat up straighter. Go on. It's simple, I explained. It states that if any contractor or vendor, currently or previously engaged by the Trust, is found by a formal, independent, third-party audit to have committed material fraud, the Trust's engagement with that vendor is immediately and automatically terminated. Well, that sounds perfectly sensible. Eleanor? Obvious? Even... There's more. Arturo. The clause must also state that the vendor and any associated entities or subsidiaries will be permanently barred from bidding on any future trust-related project for a period of no less than 5 years. There was a long pause. That is aggressive, Arturo said quietly. That's not just a slap on the wrist. That's a corporate death sentence in this town. It's protective, I countered. It safeguards the donations. It ensures the money goes to the music, not into someone's pocket. I want it put to a vote immediately. Make it retroactive to the start of the Riverlight project. Arturo, who had managed volatile orchestras his entire life, understood the power play instantly. He convened an emergency board meeting via teleconference the very next day. As I had anticipated, Leonard Caldwell, who held a non-voting seat on the board as the primary contractor, dialed in. Arturo presented the E. Whitcomb Integrity Clause. I could almost hear Leonard waving his hand dismissively through the phone. It's just legal boilerplate, he boomed, clearly distracted by something on his end. Protects us all. Fine by me. Arturo. Let's get it passed. I've got a concrete pour I need to oversee. The motion was seconded by a board member nervous about protecting the anonymous donor. The vote passed unanimously. No one thought it would ever apply to them. They had just happily, blindly, loaded the gun and handed it right back to me. With the bylaw in place, I secured the remaining pieces. I called the district attorney's office. Kendra Lyle and I were not friends, but we shared a deep, professional respect forged during my years at the Tri-County office. We had put several crooked councilmen in jail together. Kendra, it's Eleanor Whitford. Eleanor. Her voice was sharp, immediate. This is a surprise. What do you have? I have a problem at the Riverlight Pavilion, I said. And I have a verified, independent CPA report detailing significant, willful fraud by a city contractor. She was silent. That is a hell of an accusation. Eleanor. Who? Caldwell Urban Works. The silence on her end was heavier this time. You had better be 100% sure of your facts. I am. I will be at the gala tomorrow night. Box A. Seat 1. I've already spoken to Arturo's office. Your seat has been moved. You will be sitting in the primary donor row, right behind me. If you're there, I'll know you're interested. If what you say is true, Kendra said, her voice hardening, I'll be there. I would have Jonah's report in my clutch, if necessary. The evidence binder would change hands between the overture and the first act. My last call was to Jonah Pike. Jonah, I need the data. It's all in the AUP report I sent you. No, I said. I need the raw data, the ledgers, the bank statements, the MAC address logs, everything. Put it on a single universal serial bus. Make every file read-only. I want it time-stamped and, most importantly, I want a checksum verification file for the entire drive. A checksum, Eleanor? What in God's name are you planning? A presentation, I said. He delivered the drive himself that afternoon. A small, black rectangle containing the entire digital case. I sealed it in a blank envelope and had it messengered to the technical booth at the Riverlight Pavilion, addressed to the head AV technician. The instructions I'd typed on a small card were simple. To be loaded onto the main projection system, display on cue, do not open or access until instructed live from the stage by Arturo Mendel or E. Whitcomb. The legal trap was set. The political trap was set. The evidence was in place. The gala was no longer just an opening night. It was a courtroom, and I had just called the first witness to the stand. The day of the gala began not with music, but with the artificial, insistent click of Bryn's phone camera. She was in full image management mode. I saw it on my own phone, which I rarely checked. Nathan's professional social media account, the one for his law firm, suddenly featured a glowing, curated post. It was a picture of him and Bryn, clinking coffee mugs, the half-finished pavilion artfully blurred in the background. The caption was pure Bryn, though it bore Nathan's name, so proud to stand with visionaries like Caldwell Urban Works as they partner with the arts in Lakehurst, a legacy project for this community. Partnering with the arts. I suppose that was one way to describe it. I stared at the post for a long minute. My son, the lawyer, a man sworn to uphold the law, was publicly endorsing a company he didn't know I was actively investigating. A company his wife was using to defraud the city and to prop up his own failing firm. The post felt like a small, sharp, digital betrayal. I arrived early, as I always do. The sun was just setting, casting the new glass facade of the pavilion in shades of orange and deep violet. Frank, the old doorman who had worked at the City Music Hall for 30 years before they transferred him here, saw me step out of my old sedan. He hurried over, his expression pained. "Mrs. Whitford," he whispered, leaning in close, his voice thick with apology. "Mrs. Whitford, I just want you to know. They've arranged Box A, your children. They told us there was a change." He was a good man, a man from an older time who understood propriety. He couldn't meet my eye. He knew disrespect when he saw it. I placed my hand on his uniformed arm. "It's all right, Frank. Thank you for the warning." I gave him a genuine smile. "I know exactly where I will be sitting." He looked confused, but seemed relieved to be absolved. I walked past him, into the swelling noise of the lobby, and so I found them, just as I had described, holding court in Box A. After the initial dismissal, after I had taken my assigned standing room spot by the railing, the Caldwells settled in to enjoy their victory. The performance, for them, had already begun. Maureen, fanning herself with a black satin fan, took a delicate sip of her champagne. She looked over at me, her smile a thin, painted line of condescension. "It's just about a little flexibility. You know. Eleanor," she said, her voice loud enough for the neighbouring boxes to hear. "We all have to find our proper place, don't we? It's what makes evenings like this run so smoothly." My proper place. standing like a servant just outside the box my family had paid for. Leonard, oblivious as ever to nuance, clapped a heavy hand on Nathan's shoulder, nearly spilling my son's drink. "It's a marvel, isn't it? Son," he boomed, his voice a gravelly engine of self-congratulation. "And this is just the beginning." He leaned in, a conspirator, though his voice never lowered. "We just got the handshake on Phase 2, the new West Wing. We signed the papers this quarter." He winked. "The money, my God, it's going to flow like a river." He laughed, a wet, guttural sound. Bryn laughed with him, a high, tinkling harmony. But Nathan didn't laugh. I watched my son. He was pale beneath his expensive tan. His smile was a grimace, a mask of filial piety. He kept checking his phone, his thumb swiping at the dark screen, searching for a signal that wasn't there. I knew why. Deke hadn't just investigated the Caldwells. He'd done a cursory check on my son's firm at my request. Whitford Hale LLP was in trouble. The balance sheet was drowning in red ink. The firm's operating accounts were dangerously, irresponsibly low. Bryn's spending on PR and branding for herself using the stolen city money had been matched by her spending from the law firm's accounts. She was living 2 fraudulent lives, and my son's career was the collateral for one of them. Nathan was stressed. He wasn't just accommodating his in-laws. He was financially desperate. He needed a lifeline. I saw Bryn notice his tension. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She glided over to him, her sequins rustling. She put her hand on his chest, a gesture of wifely support that looked entirely staged. She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear, her eyes flicking toward me for 1/2 second. Her whisper was tiny, but in a lull between the orchestra's tuning, I caught the shape of it, the sibilant hiss. "It's fine," she murmured. "Just get her to sign the POA after the party. Just get her to sign. It'll all be fine." There it is. The end game. They needed the POA tonight. They needed my signature to unlock my assets, to liquidate the River Cottage, to plug the hole in the firm's finances before the partners found out. They needed to use my life's savings to cover their crimes. They all turned back to the stage as the house lights began to dim. Leonard was in my seat. Maureen was beside him. Bryn and Nathan were standing. A united, beautiful, desperate front. I let my hand rest on the velvet armrest of seat 1, the one Leonard was occupying. My fingers pressed down, past the plush fabric, past the new padding. I felt the familiar, cold, sharp edge of the engraving in the wood, the one I'd had commissioned when I made the first donation 20 years ago, long before the Caldwells even knew this project existed. A thin, inlaid strip of steel, forming 2 letters, E, W, Eleanor Whitford. Leonard shifted his weight, and my fingers were pushed away. I pulled my hand back. The lights went down. The moment was here. The opening overture finished to a healthy round of applause. The MC, a local news anchor with a plastic smile and a booming voice, returned to the podium. "Thank you. Thank you," he projected, his voice filling the new, acoustically perfect hall. And now, ladies and gentlemen, before our main performance, we have a very special presentation. This is a new award, established just this week by the Board of Trustees. It's called the Guardian Award. He paused for dramatic effect, reading from his teleprompter. This award is presented to an individual whose commitment to this project went beyond mere generosity. It honors the anonymous benefactor who, at a critical moment, stepped in not only to fund, but to fiercely protect the financial and artistic integrity of the Riverlight project. In Box A, Leonard Caldwell clapped loudly, nudging Bryn. He clearly assumed this was some generic award for all the donors, which, in his mind, meant him. The MC continued. This benefactor insisted on anonymity, but the board has managed to convince them to accept this small token on behalf of the entire city. And so, the inaugural Guardian Award goes to E. Whitcomb. A drum roll started, cheesy and out of place. The orchestra began a brassy fanfare, and then, abruptly, the music stopped cold. The conductor, following Arturo's cue, had cut them off mid-note. A single, brilliant white spotlight detached itself from the stage and began to move. It slid past the front rows, climbing the wall of the pavilion, until it landed, blazing and merciless, directly on Box A. The light was blinding. I saw Leonard blink, confused. Bryn raised a hand to shield her eyes, her smile frozen in place. Maureen looked around, expecting someone to stand up. Then, from the center of the donor row just behind them, Arturo Mendel rose to his feet. He stepped into the edge of the spotlight. As chairman of the trust, Arturo's voice, unamplified, carried with the weight of his old command. It is my distinct honor to invite our guardian, our benefactor, E. Whitcomb, to the stage to accept this award. He turned, but he didn't look at Box A. He looked directly at the stage. The spotlight operator, confused, followed Arturo's gaze, swinging the massive beam away from the box and onto the empty podium. The MC shuffled his note cards, completely lost. Perhaps our benefactor is... And from the shadows of the stage wing, a place reserved for performers and technicians, I emerged. I had changed in a small backstage dressing room Arturo had reserved for me. I was no longer in the simple silk dress I'd arrived in. I was now in an impeccably tailored, simple black sheath. Nothing flashy. Just the uniform of my old job. The uniform of an auditor about to deliver a finding. The entire hall went silent. I mean a silence so profound I could hear the air moving through the ventilation system. The main camera operator, catching the movement, found me. My image exploded onto the massive digital screens flanking the stage, in that brilliant, unforgiving high definition. I saw the reactions from Box A. Nathan stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled backward. His mouth fell open, a silent "mom" forming on his lips. Bryn did not move. She simply froze, her body rigid, her smile evaporating, leaving behind a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. And Maureen Caldwell, in a beautiful, slow-motion cascade, let the black satin fan slip from her grasp. It tumbled onto the velvet railing and then silently to the floor. The MC looked from me to his cue cards and back again, his professional veneer cracking. I don't. Ladies and gentlemen. The audience began to applaud, a scattered, confused sound at first, then growing louder as I walked calmly to the center of the stage. Arturo met me there. He did not hug me. He shook my hand, a gesture of profound, professional respect, and handed me the heavy, crystal award. I walked to the podium. I set the award down. I looked out at the sea of faces, all turned toward me. The light was hot on my face. I saw Nathan, still standing, looking like a ghost. I saw Bryn. Her eyes narrowed, the shock morphing into a cold, dawning horror. I saw Leonard, his face crimson with confusion. And just one row behind them, I saw District Attorney Kendra Lyle watching me, her expression neutral, waiting. I tapped the microphone once. A sharp, clear thump echoed through the hall. "Thank you, Arturo," I said. My voice was calm, clear, and perfectly amplified. "And thank you, ladies and gentlemen." I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting them all lean in. "Sometimes," I said, my voice dropping just slightly, "in order to protect the music, you have to turn off the noise." A few people clapped politely, thinking it was a metaphor about acoustics, but most did not. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer confused. It was heavy, sharp, and absolute. They understood. Everyone in that hall, from the politicians in the front row to the Caldwells in the box, suddenly and completely understood that this was not an acceptance speech. This was a deposition. That noise is not just a metaphor. It is the sound of inefficiency. It is the sound of waste. And in its worst, most corrosive form, it is the sound of fraud. As a condition of my anonymous donation, the one that funded 40% of the acoustic shielding you are enjoying tonight, I asked the board to ratify a new bylaw. It was put to a vote at an emergency session. It is called the Whitcomb Integrity Clause. I let that hang in the air, my voice echoing slightly in the magnificent hall. I could see Leonard Caldwell shifting in my seat, his confusion hardening into annoyance. The clause is simple. It states that if any contractor, vendor, or associated entity is found by a formal, independent, third-party audit to have engaged in willful misrepresentation or material fraud against the trust that entity's contract is terminated. Immediately, a ripple of shock went through the front rows. This was not the language of a gala. Furthermore, that vendor and all its subsidiaries are barred from bidding on any future trust-related projects for a period of no less than 5 years. I saw Leonard's hand grip the velvet armrest. And finally, the clause mandates that all findings from that independent report be turned over to the district attorney's office for review. The silence was absolute. I looked directly at Box A. Bryn's face was chalk white. Nathan looked as if he had been struck. An accusation of this magnitude requires definitive proof. I have it. I engaged the services of Mr. Jonah Pike, a certified public accountant, to perform an agreed-upon procedures report. The report is dated October 28th. The file number is 779 Delta. I have it here. I also, as was mentioned, provided the technical booth with a secure universal serial bus containing Mr. Pike's findings. I would ask the technical director to please bring up the file labeled Caldwell Flowchart. The massive screens on either side of the stage, which had been projecting my face, flickered to black. They were replaced by a cold, clinical, graphical display. It was a map. What you are seeing, ladies and gentlemen, is the money. On the far left, in a green box, you see Caldwell Urban Works. In the center, in a yellow box, you see a shell corporation registered in Delaware L&M Consulting. And on the far right, in a red box, a high-limit corporate credit card. The name on that credit card account is Bryn Whitford. A gasp, sharp and collective, rose from the audience. Now, please play the capture file. The screens changed again. This time, it was a screen recording of a bank ledger. There was no music, no narration. The only sound in the entire pavilion was the sharp, sterile click of a mouse, amplified over the new sound system. We all watched as the cursor moved. Click. An invoice was approved. A change order for $4,900. Click. The funds were transferred from the Riverlight Project account to L&M Consulting. Click. A second change order. $4,850. Click. The funds were transferred. We watched it happen 21 separate times. Then, the final part of the recording. The mouse moved from the L&M Consulting ledger to the payment portal for the red credit card. We watched the cursor type in the full, accumulated amount. We watched it click, submit payment. We watched the available credit on Bryn's account jump. The video stopped, freezing on the payment confirmation. The data on that drive is secure, to prove that it was not tampered with. I asked Mr. Pike to run a checksum validation. For the technical experts and legal counsel present tonight, that verification code is 4 Alpha 72 Delta 99. Charlie. Now, please show the authentication file. The screen changed a final time. It showed a letterhead from the digital signature software company. It confirmed that the electronic signatures used to approve the final 3 fraudulent change orders, the ones that emptied the account, did not originate from a city computer. They originated from a private laptop. The MAC address, the unique digital fingerprint of that machine, is registered to the home network of Nathan and Bryn Whitford. I motioned to the booth. The screens went black. I stepped away from the podium, my voice needing no amplification in the stunned void. I made my donation to build a stage for Beethoven, for Mozart, for the future of music in this city. I did not donate my money to build a stage for schemes. The murmur started in the third row. It was not polite chatter. It was a low, angry hum. A prominent local banker, a man who sat on 3 different city boards, stood up. He did not applaud. He simply stood, glaring at box A. Then another donor stood, and another. They were not giving an ovation. They were disassociating. They were drawing a line, turning their backs on the Caldwells in real time. I looked to Arturo Mendel. He had remained standing in the donor row. His face was a mask of grim duty. He was holding a thick, spiral-bound copy of Jonah's full report and a copy of the emergency bylaw, signed by the board. He did not walk to the stage. He turned, took 2 steps, and leaned into the row directly behind him. He handed the entire binder to District Attorney Kendra Lyle. Kendra stood up. She accepted the binder. She did not open it. She simply held it against her chest and, with the full attention of everyone in that hall, looked up, past me, and locked eyes with Box A. The file and the future had been officially transferred. The black screens were my cue to leave, but a new sound cut through the murmuring. It was Bryn. No. Her voice was a shriek, ugly and sharp, tearing through the refined air. She was scrambling out of the box, pushing past a stunned donor. That is misinformation. You can't just show that it's taken out of context. She was at the aisle, pointing up at me, her face a mask of furious desperation. We were optimizing cash flow. It's a standard corporate practice. You don't understand? Optimizing, I said, my voice cutting cleanly back across the hall. I motioned to the technical booth. Please bring up the file marked timestamp. You'll find it matches the MAC address we just saw. The screen lit up again. This time, it was a split-screen display. On one side was the electronic signature log for the final, fraudulent $4,900 change order. The timestamp was 2:15 p.m. on September 12th. On the other side of the screen was a screenshot, taken from Bryn's public social media account. It was a picture of her, holding a latte, captioned, "Just grinding from the Home Office, big things coming." The timestamp on that post, 2:17 p.m. on September 12th. "You were busy," I said calmly. "Approving fraudulent invoices from your Home Office, and then boasting about it." She was framed. Maureen Caldwell was on her feet now, her voice a shrill echo of her daughter's. She gripped the velvet railing of the box, her knuckles white. "This is a setup. My daughter was set up by this old woman, Leonard. Leonard was trying to get to his feet, his face a terrifying shade of purple. "Turn it off," he bellowed at the MC. "Turn off the screens. This is slander. This is order." Arturo Mendel's voice was not a shout, but a command that sliced through the chaos. He had found a small, ceremonial gavel on the Trust's podium, the one used for board meetings, and he struck it once. The sharp crack was louder than any shout. "Mr. Caldwell, this is an official proceeding of the Riverlight Trust Board," Arturo said, his voice level. "You are out of order." He turned to the donors in the box. "Esteemed members of the board, you have seen the independent report, you have seen the evidence, and you have ratified the Whitcomb Integrity Clause." He raised his voice to address the entire donor section. "I now call for an immediate vote, as required by our bylaws. All board members in favor of activating the Integrity Clause based on the findings presented. Please stand." It was not a vote. It was an instant judgment, one by one. Then, in a wave, every single voting member of the board of directors stood up. The banker, the philanthropist, the retired judge, the entire row. It was absolute. Arturo let the silence hang for a moment, letting the Caldwells see the wall of condemnation. "The motion passes," Arturo announced, his voice ringing with finality. "The results are as follows. Effective immediately 1. The contract between the Riverlight Trust and Caldwell Urban Works is hereby terminated, effective as of this second. 2. The 5-year ban on Caldwell Urban Works, its principals, and all associated subsidiaries from any future trust bidding is hereby activated. 3. The board authorizes our General Counsel to transfer Mr. Pike's full report and all associated findings to the District Attorney's Office, which she has already graciously accepted. As if summoned by his words, 2 men in simple, dark suits appeared at the entrance to the donor boxes. They were not police. They were the pavilion's professional security, the kind that handles unruly patrons with quiet, immovable force. They did not have handcuffs. They did not rush. They simply walked to the entrance of Box A and stood there, waiting. One of them spoke, his voice too low to be heard by the hall, but his gesture was clear. He was inviting Leonard, Maureen, and Bryn to leave the donor area. Leonard looked from the security men to Arturo, to me, his face crumpled, the rage replaced by a sudden, awful understanding of his own complete irrelevance. Maureen was grabbing her purse, her hands shaking, her face a ruin of smeared makeup. Bryn was just staring, but I was not watching them. I was watching my son. Nathan had not moved. He had not defended his wife. He had not looked at her. He was still standing, but he seemed to be held up only by the chair in front of him. He had sagged, as if his bones had turned to dust. His eyes, wide with a terrible, dawning clarity, lifted from the scene of his in-laws' ruin. He looked past Bryn, past the security, past the shocked audience. He looked up at me, standing alone on the stage, bathed in the spotlight. And in that one, shattering look, I saw him finally understand. He understood the POA. He understood the missing chairs. He understood the social media posts and the desperate need for my signature. He understood, at last, why seat 1 was my seat, why it had always been my seat, and why it could never, ever be taken by anyone else. I walked slowly from the podium, not toward the backstage wing, but toward the very front edge of the stage. The light followed me. I looked down, past the orchestra pit, to the front rows, and then up, to the box where my son still stood, frozen. My seat was never in the VIP box, I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the hall in the dead silence. My seat is here, amidst the truth. I motioned to the ushers, Frank and another young man, who were waiting in the aisle as I had instructed. Gentlemen, the plaque for Box A, if you please. They walked over to the now empty box. The security detail was escorting a weeping Maureen and a rigid, silent Leonard out of the main doors. Bryn was lingering, still trying to talk to Nathan, who would not look at her. Frank entered the box, retrieved the small wooden block, and brought it down to the stage. He handed it to me. It was the block Bryn had so casually flipped over, the one that read, Box A. I held it up for the cameras. This is the marker for the box. Then, I turned it over. On the reverse side, inlaid in the same polished wood, was another brass plate. The spotlight caught it perfectly. It did not read E.W. It did not read E. Whitcomb. It read, in full, clear, block letters, Eleanor Whitford. I am E. Whitcomb. I said to the silent hall, but I am Eleanor Whitford. This is my name, and that is my seat. This time, the entire audience rose to its feet. The applause was not confused. It was not scattered. It was a single, deafening roar, a thunder of support that shook the new acoustic panels. I let them applaud for a moment. Then I raised my hand, and in an instant, they fell silent again. They were waiting. I turned my gaze from the audience, across the empty space, and looked back up at Box A. The Caldwells were gone. Only Bryn and Nathan remained. Bryn saw me looking. She saw the entire hall looking at her. She opened her mouth, her face twisting. He knew nothing, she started, her voice a desperate plea. This was not his. Enough. Bryn. Nathan's voice was hoarse, broken. He raised his hand, not to strike her, but to motion stop. Just stop. His eyes were brimming with tears, and he finally, fully, looked at her. He saw her. I did not look at Bryn. My business was not with her. She was a simple criminal, and the law would handle her. My business was with my son. I looked at Nathan. He was a broken man, standing in the ruins of his life, his career, his marriage. He met my gaze. I did not offer comfort. I did not offer anger. I simply held his look, and I gave him one, single, slight nod. Choose. He understood. He turned away from his wife. He looked at the terrified MC who was hiding by the podium. Give me the microphone, Nathan commanded, his voice scraping but regaining a slee-jh of its old legal authority. The MC handed it over. Nathan stepped to the railing of the box. My name is Nathan Whitford, he said to the silent hall. My firm and my name have been associated with this awful act. He choked on the word. I offer my deepest, most profound apologies to the trust, to the donors, and to the city. He paused, his voice shattering. And, Mum, I am so sorry. He let the microphone fall from his hand. He had chosen. From the donor row, dear Kendra Lyle stood once more. For the record, she announced, my office is in receipt of the files. We will be reviewing this matter beginning immediately. Arturo stepped to the main podium. The Board of Directors thanks Eleanor Whitford, our guardian, for her courage. The gala will continue. The music will be played. Thanks to her, we can be assured that the donation meant to support it is now, and will remain, fully protected. The spotlight on me snapped off. The main house lights began to dim. The audience, in a rustle of silk and suits, began to sit down. I walked off the stage, not to the applause, but back through the hall. I walked up the aisle to Box A. Bryn was gone. I did not see where she went. Only Nathan remained, slumped in a chair in the back of the box, his face in his hands. I did not speak to him. I walked past him. I walked to the front row. I stepped over Maureen's discarded fan. Eleanor Whitford, sat down in seat 1. A wave of applause, quieter this time, respectful, rolled through the hall as the donors saw me take my place. It faded as the last light went out. The hall was plunged into a perfect, expectant darkness. The conductor raised his baton. The first, crystalline note of the violin solo began. The entire hall held its breath. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so curious. Where are you all listening from today? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and show your support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.